The first time I threw up cocoa, it looked almost like chocolate syrup, thick, sticky, warm, and for a second, I thought maybe I was dreaming. But it wasn't a dream. It was 3 in the morning, and I was hunched over the sink in Grandma's creaky kitchen, my jaw aching, my tongue tasting like something rotting in a wet crawl space. I remember staring at the thick brown sludge pooling in the basin, watching it coil like a dead snake, and catching the faint shimmer of something pale embedded in it, a tiny curved fragment. A nail. Yellow. Human. 3 days before that, I'd found the bunny. Grandma's house had always smelled like dry cedar and floor polish, but that day there was something else. Something burnt sweet, like sugar left too long on a stove. I'd come up from Boston after her stroke to help clean the place up, just for a few days. I told myself. She couldn't move much anymore, and the nurse said she mostly just muttered and watched the window. I didn't expect her to talk, let alone warn me about anything. I found the bunny in an old tin box tucked behind suitcases and moth-bitten quilts up in the attic. It was heavy for hollow chocolate. Dark brown, its ears chipped at the tips, but still glossy. There was no wrapper. No label. Just this ancient, almost sacred-looking rabbit. And the moment I touched it, the attic grew colder, like the air shifted away from my skin. Dust particles floated slower. The floor groaned beneath my feet, even though I hadn't moved. I didn't think much of it at the time, just a strange relic from a forgotten Easter past. I brought it downstairs and set it on the kitchen counter. Grandma, slouched in her armchair like a wrinkled wax figure, suddenly jerked her head toward me. Her eyes weren't blind like I remembered, they were black and wet and full of something alive. "You don't eat it," she whispered, voice all gravel and spit. "It's not empty." That should have been enough. It should have made me toss the damn thing into the trash, or at least out the window. But the smell, it had changed. Richer. Sweeter. Like melted dark chocolate mixed with something darker, something earthy. I didn't eat it that night. Not yet. But I did place it by the window in my room. And at some point during the night, I heard the first scratching. Faint at first. Like tiny claws on wood. Or teeth. From inside the walls. By morning, it stopped. I convinced myself it was mice. The house was old, after all. When I checked the bunny, it hadn't moved. But the chip on its left ear was gone. Perfect again. Like it had healed. That was the second red flag. The third came when I finally bit into it. It was a dare, almost. To myself. I wasn't afraid of childhood stories or whispering grandmas or haunted candy. I took a bite straight from the ear. The chocolate cracked just like it should have. Bitter. Thick. And then, soft. A pocket of something foul. Mushy and sour. I spat it out instantly, but not before I'd felt it with my tongue, something rigid, smooth, and curved. It landed on the floor with a wet plop. A nail. Yellow. Ripped from a finger. I screamed, stumbled back, slammed my shin against the table. The bunny remained still on the counter, a chunk missing from its ear again, the edges oozing something too dark to be chocolate. That night the scratching came back. Louder. Closer. Not from the attic. From the walls around my bed. I couldn't sleep. I kept the light on. Every time I blinked too long, I'd hear the faint skitter, the occasional knock, like someone, or something, was tapping to get my attention. And the smell. Not chocolate anymore. Rot. Spoiled meat cooked in sugar. I checked my mouth in the mirror and found nothing, but when I leaned closer, a brown smear trickled from the corner of my lip. I wiped it with my sleeve. It stained. The stink was unbearable. I ran to Grandma's room the next morning. Her mouth was open, like she'd been mid-sentence all night. Her eyes locked on mine. "You didn't spit it all out," she hissed. "It's growing now." I backed away, disgusted, afraid, unsure if she meant the nail or something else. Her breathing turned ragged, and she began whispering the same word over and over again, hollow, 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 like a chant. Her hand shook, pointing somewhere behind me. I didn't turn to look. The next evening I found the bunny outside my door. I hadn't moved it. I hadn't touched it since that awful bite. But there it sat, pristine again, whole, no bite mark, its glossy surface glistening in the hallway light. I picked it up with a towel and tossed it back into the tin, shoved it into the oven, and turned the heat all the way up. But the smell that filled the kitchen wasn't chocolate. It was hair. Burning hair and wet skin. I left the house that night. Drove around until the gas light came on. When I came back, the oven was off. The bunny was sitting on the counter. Whole. Waiting. I stopped sleeping. By the fourth day, my gums bled. My teeth fell loose. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw shadows in corners that weren't there when I opened them. Eerie shapes. Like something small and fast crawling behind furniture, ducking under baseboards. My dreams turned into nightmares so vivid I woke up screaming, convinced my skin was full of holes. The sound inside the walls became rhythmic, almost like chewing. No matter how loud I played music or tried to drown it with fans, it came back. Like it knew when I was alone. I tried leaving. I packed my bag, but the car wouldn't start. The engine made a high-pitched whine and then, silence. I walked outside. Every window in the house reflected something different. Not me. Not the street. Just the dark. That night, I coughed up a clump of hair. Coarse. Dark brown. It looked like rabbit fur. I went to Grandma again. She was smiling. Wide. Too wide. Don't fight it, she croaked. You chewed its ear. Now it chews back. I screamed at her. Demanded answers. She only laughed. Or maybe cried. Her voice blended into something inhuman. The bunny began to appear in places I hadn't left it. In my bed. In the fridge. On the windowsill outside my shower. Each time more pristine. More polished. And heavier. I opened it again. With gloves, I broke the head in half. Inside was no chocolate. Just soft, pulsating flesh. And teeth. Tiny human teeth set in a ring around a wet, breathing core. I burned it again. Used lighter fluid. Tossed it into a metal bucket and watched it scream. Yes, it screamed. Like a rabbit in a trap. That high-pitched, hellish wail that pierces your skull. In the morning, it was back on my pillow. I haven't eaten in days. Everything tastes like dirt. My lips are cracked, but I keep finding chocolate residue around them. I lock the doors. Barricade the windows. But every night, the bunny gets closer. Sometimes I think it's not a bunny anymore. Or maybe it never was. Maybe it's something older. Something cursed. I went back to the attic. Hoping for answers. Found more tins. Rows of them. All identical. All sealed. Except one. Empty. Except for a single tag tied with red thread. Never truly hollow. Only waiting. My fingers are longer now. Or maybe bonier. My skin is splitting at the nails. Sometimes I feel scratching beneath my own ribs. I hear them talking to me now. In whispers. In dreams. Grandma's gone. Or hiding. I don't know anymore. All I know is I'm not alone. I never was. There's something inside me. And it's hungry. I still remember how cold it was in that chapel, even though the air outside was warm for April. I remember the way the door slammed shut behind us, harder than the breeze could have managed, and the sound of the key dropping on the gravel just outside, out of reach. I remember the way the congregation turned as one, like dancers on a stage, with their hands bloody and their eyes glassy, all of them staring at us without blinking, without moving. And then that voice, smooth and slow, the preacher's voice rising up from the pulpit, announcing that this morning they would be offering a new kind of sacrifice. My wife tried to pull the handle. My son cried. but it was the sound from beneath the floorboards that stole all breath from my lungs. It was a child's laughter, soft, playful, wrong. That was the moment I knew we never should have come here. And it was already too late to leave. We'd driven out before dawn, just as the pastor of our own church back in Knoxville had recommended, all excited to witness something authentically old. He said there was this remote little chapel in the hills outside Maryville where the congregation still held a traditional sunrise Easter service, just like they did over 100 years ago. No electricity, no microphones, just candles, wooden pews, and good old-fashioned faith. It sounded charming. My wife, Ellen, loved the idea. She said we needed to show our son, Jacob, that church wasn't all guitars and Instagram sermons. I didn't argue. She packed cinnamon rolls in a tin, and I filled a thermos with coffee. Jacob brought his stuffed rabbit. We left just after 3 in the morning and followed the dark winding road into the Smoky Mountains, past shuttered gas stations and hollow-eyed deer. By the time we reached the chapel, a soft blue-gray fog had swallowed the valley. The building stood like a scar in the landscape, narrow and bone-white, with a small steeple rising like a finger toward the sky. There were no lights. No sound. Just a line of parked trucks and old sedans, all facing the same way, like they'd arrived in silence and in some kind of order. A crooked sign hung above the door, carved letters worn smooth by time, Holy Resurrection Chapel. I felt uneasy even before we stepped inside, but I didn't say anything. I wish I had. I wish I'd trusted that shiver crawling down my back as we approached the entrance. Because the moment we stepped across that threshold, everything changed. The inside of the chapel was candlelit, but barely. Shadows danced along the wooden walls, flickering and shifting like they were alive. The pews were full, completely full, every seat taken by locals who stared straight ahead with their backs rigid and hands resting on their knees. It was quiet. Too quiet. No coughs, no whispers, no shuffling. And none of them looked at us. Not until the door closed. Then they turned. It wasn't just the blood. It was the way it coated their fingers like paint. Thick and dark. It stained their Sunday best, left smears on their hymnals. Yet none of them looked injured. No one cried out. They just stared, mouths slightly open, eyes milky and wide. I grabbed Ellen's hand. She squeezed it so hard I thought my fingers might snap. Jacob clung to her coat, his rabbit dangling by one ear. From the pulpit, a man rose. Tall. Thin. Black suit that looked older than time. His collar tight around his pale neck. He smiled. I wish he hadn't. Welcome, he said, and his voice filled the chapel like it had been waiting for centuries. We have prayed for this morning. For the sunrise. For the offering. Ellen turned the door handle behind us, but it wouldn't move. It was locked. Then came that metallic clink outside, the key falling to the stones. The preacher tilted his head like he'd heard it too, but his smile didn't waver. Please, he said. Join us. The hour draws near. And from the floor beneath our feet, we heard it, light and lilting, the unmistakable giggle of a child. But it was not the laugh of a child at play. It was cold. Cursed. Like something mocking us from a nightmare. We sat. There was nowhere else to go. He spoke of rebirth. Of cycles. Of the shedding of flesh. His words sounded like scripture but weren't. He quoted nothing. Just kept talking about the light that comes from blood and the sunrise that demands sacrifice. The congregation nodded along, still silent, still unmoving. Occasionally one would let out a whisper, not a word, not even a sound, but the hint of breath, like wind through bones. I couldn't keep my hands from shaking. I held Jacob close. He buried his face in my chest and whispered that the floor was cold. That it was breathing. Ellen looked to me, her eyes wide with terror, and I realized she saw it too, a subtle shift beneath the wood, like something was moving under there. Crawling. Watching. The preacher stepped down from the pulpit and approached the front pew. A woman rose, thin, hair plaited down her back, eyes shining wet and red. She raised her hands to reveal a baby wrapped in cloth. But it wasn't crying. It wasn't breathing either. The preacher took the bundle in his arms and held it high. From death, we summon life. From silence, we awaken the voice of the Son. And then he placed the baby on the floor. Not on the pew, not on the altar, on the floorboards. Directly above the place where that laugh had come from. The child vanished. I don't know how else to describe it. One moment it was there, pale face, limp hands, closed eyes, and the next, it was gone. Swallowed by the chapel. No noise. No reaction. The woman sat down, eyes forward, hands red. No one gasped. No one moved. Except Jacob. He whispered to me again. She's hungry. I asked him who he meant, but he only pointed down. The preacher returned to the pulpit. His voice grew louder, more urgent. The sunrise waits. It calls for one more. It must be one born of choice. That's when the congregation finally stirred. Together. Slowly. They rose from the pews and turned toward us, as if they'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. My body refused to move. I wanted to run, to scream, to break the glass of the old windows and carry my family into the woods. But I couldn't. Not with Jacob holding my hand, whispering that she was smiling now. That she liked us. That she wanted to keep us. The preacher extended a hand. Come forward, he said. Bring the boy. Let him see the dawn. Ellen stood. I don't know how or why. Her face was blank. Her hands trembling. She reached for Jacob. I told her to stop. She didn't hear me. She didn't see me anymore. I lunged, but the pews were closing in. Not the people, the wood itself. Warping, shifting, forming walls between us. I heard her scream then, just once, sharp and terrified. Then silence. The congregation stepped aside for her as she walked to the center of the chapel with Jacob in her arms. He wasn't fighting. He looked happy. They stood over the place in the floor. The preacher raised his arms. Let the earth receive him. A deep sound rose from beneath the boards, like 1,000 children whispering at once, layered in shadow and hunger. The floor cracked. The candles died. Darkness flooded the room like smoke. And from that cursed place beneath our feet, something reached up and took him. I don't remember escaping. I don't remember how I ended up outside, crawling through gravel and blood and old, broken hymnals. The sun was just beginning to rise, the sky bruised in gold. The chapel stood still and quiet behind me, door wide open now, as if nothing had happened. There were no cars. No people. No trace that anyone had been there at all. No Ellen. No Jacob. I go back every Easter. I don't know why. Maybe to find them. Maybe to hear that laugh again. Maybe to offer myself in their place. But the chapel never reappears. Not yet. I don't know how long I've been here. I stopped measuring time after the third sunrise that didn't bring light, only a deeper shade of gray. I sit in my basement with the light off, afraid of drawing his attention again. I used to think monsters came from under the bed, from shadows and dreams. But this one smiles from the daylight, standing still in fields, in parking lots, in backyard hedges. He doesn't blink. He doesn't move. Until night comes. It all started on Easter Sunday. The grass was still wet from the morning dew when my daughter, Ellie, called me outside. She had found an egg. A painted one. No one had organized an Easter hunt in our town this year, not after the incident last spring, but there it was. Bright yellow, speckled with blue dots, resting neatly on the edge of our garden bed like it had been placed with intention. I watched as she turned it in her small hands and shook it. Something inside clicked softly. My wife, Rachel, came out holding her coffee, half asleep, and squinted toward the egg. "Where'd you get that, sweetie?" But Ellie just shrugged and smiled. Kids don't question magic the way we do. Then she cracked it open. It didn't make sense at first. I thought maybe it was one of those fake joke eggs with slime or something gross inside. But no. It was soft. Wet. A sphere, organic, delicate. A human eye. A fucking eye. And it blinked. Reflexively. Twice. Ellie dropped it and screamed. I stared at the white of it, veined, staring upward without purpose. Rachel gasped and pulled her back, but I couldn't move. I swear to God it looked at me. We burned it in the fire pit that night, even though I could still smell it on my hands hours later. A mix of egg dye, blood, and something rotten. Rachel thought maybe it was some sick prank, local teens, some cursed TikTok thing. But I already knew. Deep down, I'd felt something. A presence. That night, I couldn't sleep. At some point past midnight, I stepped onto the back porch and lit a cigarette. The yard was quiet. The woods beyond, motionless. But just as I exhaled, I saw him. At the edge of the yard. On the border where the trimmed grass met the tall weeds, there stood a man in a bunny costume. Not a cartoonish one. This thing was gray, matted, wrong. The fur looked like it had been soaked in swamp water. The ears flopped awkwardly to the side, and the head, it was massive. Oversized. Distorted. The eyes were large and black, glinting like beetle shells. He didn't wave. Didn't move. Just stood there. Staring. I blinked and he was gone. The next day, more eggs. This time 5. Scattered in a perfect semicircle near the swing set. Red, green, pink, white, and one painted like a galaxy. We didn't touch them. We called the police. They laughed. I watched from the window as the cop poked one with his pen. It cracked. He recoiled, cursed, and quickly wrapped it in a bag. He wouldn't tell us what he saw. Just told us to keep our doors locked and avoid contact if any more showed up. Ellie started having nightmares. She said the bunny man was talking to her from the woods. She called him the tall one. She said he promised her a better place where no one ever cried, and no one ever died. She said he visits her room but never steps inside. Always waits. Always watching. We removed all the Easter decorations from the house. We put salt by the doors, burned sage, even called the local priest. Nothing helped. Every night, he came closer. I started seeing him during the day. Not just outside, in reflections, in car mirrors, in the shimmer of the television when it was off. Always on the edge. Just barely visible. My vision would twitch and he'd vanish, but the fear would linger like a fever. Then the eggs multiplied. Dozens, then hundreds. Our yard was infested. You couldn't take a step without crunching one. Some held teeth. Others, tongues, bits of hair, nails, things that twitched and pulsed. I saw one with a still beating heart. I didn't tell Rachel. She was already shaking when she woke, skin pale, barely speaking. The neighborhood went silent. No more lawnmowers, no kids outside, no wind chimes. Just a thick, eerie blanket of quiet. The kind of quiet that screams. Then came Easter night. The house groaned. I woke to Ellie's bed empty. The door open. Rachel was frozen in the hallway, pointing toward the stairs. I didn't think. I just ran. I found her standing in the yard, barefoot in her pajamas, surrounded by eggs. She was holding one, bright gold, with a spiraling black line etched into it. I begged her not to open it. She smiled at me. But it wasn't her smile. "Daddy, he says you can come too. But you have to see first." She cracked the egg. I don't remember what was inside. I think I screamed. I think I tried to run. But everything turned to static, like my brain couldn't process what it saw. Colors that didn't belong in this world. movements that rewound themselves. A mouth inside a mouth. Ellie dropped the egg, and the world tilted. He stepped out of the shadows. Tall. His head brushed the top of the oak tree. The costume rippled like it was alive. His hands, large, fur-covered claws, reached down and gently touched Ellie's shoulders. She didn't flinch. She smiled wider. Then he looked at me. I didn't run. I couldn't. My body refused. I think I felt him inside my head, rearranging memories, whispering in a language I couldn't hear but somehow understood. You looked inside, he said, though his mouth never moved. I woke up in the basement. The upstairs is silent now. I haven't dared to go back up. The windows are covered from the outside. No light gets in. Sometimes I hear eggs cracking. Sometimes I hear Rachel calling me, but it sounds like her voice is coming from under the floorboards, layered with static and insect clicks. And sometimes I hear Ellie giggling. There's one egg down here with me. Just one. It's glowing faintly in the dark, like it's pulsing with a heartbeat of its own. Painted black, speckled with stars. I think it's waiting for me. I don't know what happens if I open it. Maybe I'll see what she saw. Maybe I'll finally understand. Maybe I'll disappear like the rest of them. But sometimes I wonder if I'm already gone. Maybe the egg cracked when I looked away. Maybe the tall one never moved closer. Maybe I've just been turning toward him this whole time. And now, I see him. Smiling. Closer than ever.